Okay, hello guys, my name is Mia Marie, and you are currently watching my Synastry Compatibility series where I go through all the 12 signs, sun signs, and how they get along. Now, as a general disclaimer, we reference so much more than just the sun sign for compatibility, but the importance of the sun and understanding someone's sun sign and accepting it and supporting it is that the sun sign describes the motives, the behaviors, the experiences that contribute to someone's sense of sanity. So we're not talking so much about what someone needs emotionally or how they flirt or what makes them great in bed, all of those very, romantic topics. We're talking about how to support someone's vitality, someone's sense of self, and someone's healing human journey. So keep in mind that this is just a gentle introduction, and you can get so much more by booking a session with me or another fantastic astrologer. 90% of my dad's side of the family is Gemini, so I have been around this energy my whole life. Gemini is the third sign of the zodiac, and so we're still in that personal perspective quadrant as it relates to what the soul wants to do. What does the soul want to do when you're a sun in Gemini? The motive behind all behavior, thoughts, failures, projects, sanity is to lovingly communicate wisdom. Gemini goes around asking questions, collecting information. So when you say you don't like something, Gemini hears, oh, they must not understand it. And they explain to you why you don't like it and where this person is coming from. And the walls start to crumble. And in the place of walls, we have acceptance. We have mutual understanding and connectedness. That's the blessing of Gemini. If you ever dated a Gemini or you're dating one now, you'll recognize that they are always working the room, partially because they're an air sign and they need to communicate. It contributes to their vitality and their life force and their life mission, but also because when you talk to people, you get stories. And Gemini is great at listening to stories. It wants an interesting story, but it's also a gifted storyteller. And in every story is a lesson. And so that's what they're doing when they're going around working the room. And you can be sitting there thinking, oh, am I just not interesting enough? You're always all over the place. You're always talking to people. Why can't you just sit here and be with me now? And the real answer, my genuine response to that is no, they can't just sit there. I mean, on an isolated instance, of course, but if you expect Gemini to sit down next to you and you guys do things together, I mean, unless you can keep up, unless you're just as quick-witted, then that's fine. But if you want them to stay in place, no, they want to work the room. So as I was saying, Gemini is an air sign, which means that it's fueled by communication and intellect. It realizes like, oh, I have a brain and my brain can think different thoughts, and these thoughts create realities. Now, because it's this air element is expressed through Gemini, Gemini is focused on collecting information for itself and its immediate environment. So it will likely be a teacher to its family, its children, its partner, its community at large, right? That would be a large expression of Gemini. Usually it's like a classroom of people or a group of people is who it's teaching and talking to. But it's really focused on building a library of information about the world. It wants to squeeze 10 lifetimes into one. They're also known to be duplicitous in nature. Geminis are two-faced, phony, and fickle. The explanation for that is actually quite simple, and the terminology might sound similar. I'm just going to say it first. They have an inner child that just will not quit. Now, I know in mainstream, social media, we hear about inner child healing. They're not focused on inner child healing. There's just a child that wants to play and have fun and engage with life for all the selfish reasons. But then there is this mature adult who has learned and developed and can impart wisdom. And so they teeter between the two in social interactions depending on how they feel. And they enjoy that they can choose to be an adult or a child in any given situation. They also have the legacy of being non-committal. And when I hear that, I think about their mythological parallel. and it's the messenger between the worlds. It's the only character in mythology that doesn't have a home. And I see this through and through with Gemini characters. They want to be on the move. In mythology, the messenger goes from heaven to earth to hell over and over again because it's collecting as much information. As I said before, that's what it lives for. That's what it wants, and that's what it's good at. In fact, it's the only energy that can move in that way. And so when a Gemini thinks about a relationship, it thinks that it has to stay still, that it can't have freedom anymore, or that it is it's liable to someone somewhere, that someone is waiting on them. And even though they may not act like they don't care, it's something that weighs on their mind, like, oh man, I'm not showing up for this person, or I'm not doing this. And it just creates ambivalence towards the idea of relationship. But Gemini is good at relationship once they find someone who they vibe with, who can speak the same language. Or if you can't speak the same language and you're not doing the same things, can exert tolerance and acceptance and encouragement towards their desire to stay on the move. Some deal breakers for Gemini: they don't like a negative Nancy. Anyone who is overly emotional, gets lost in emotions, has a heaviness to their aura, to their vibe, is going to repel them, because it's the opposite of what they want. It's the opposite of what makes them feel stable within themselves, even though, you know, they are constantly in motion. I wouldn't consider them to be the most stable. Another thing they can't stand is if you can't have a conversation, playful, witty banter, if you're not intellectual, if you're not learning, if you're not stimulated by ideas and thoughts and theories, and you can't contribute to their overall development as it relates to the intellect and the mind, they're going to get bored and they're going to find you uninteresting. You don't listen, or you're unable to understand what they're communicating. Gemini people, I hear this the most from them. When they have relationship complaints, it's, I don't feel heard. I don't feel understood. I don't feel like you get me. And they're not talking about their vibe. They're talking about what they're literally saying to you. It's like falling on deaf ears. They have the gift of the gab. They want it appreciated. You have to also have an appreciation for humor, because for them, life is a joke. The whole thing is the joke until it's not, and their little child comes out and everything really matters. It's super important. But for the most part, they like to, you know, poke fun at you, and they don't want you to have a full-blown tantrum. So all in all, Gemini is the third sign of the zodiac. It's intellectual. It's here to create a story. It's trying to collect a lot of information. It's a socially oriented sign, and it requires freedom, and not because it doesn't like you or doesn't love you, but because it's trying to stay sane. It's trying to develop, and it's trying to. Someone who is born with the sun in Virgo is here to purify. Now, it doesn't always come off that way, and if you don't have a trained eye or ear, you can feel judged and criticized when a Virgo is around, because what they do, it's like their love language. They listen to you, they watch what you're doing, and they point out what's not working, what you're doing wrong, and what you can do better. And the reason why they want to do this in every area of their life, not only towards their partner, is because when you fix all of the things that are wrong, then you are often left purified, clean, clear. You're able to think clearly. You're able to connect with soul. There's often a spiritual component to a Virgo. They're the opposite of Pisces, and they are big on acts of service. That's often their love language. They have a huge focus on health, routines, systems. They are quick thinkers. It can be really hard to calm their body down at the end of the night. That's how it manifests. It's ruled by Mercury. And so they have an amazing capacity to analyze information and to synthesize information, but it can sometimes manifest in the nervous system as being like jittery or on edge. They can kind of sleep with one eye open. Virgo is the second earth sign, and so it takes Taurus's competence, skill set, and confidence, self-confidence, and it goes, okay, how can we apply this to serve more people? How can we market this? How can we sell this? What systems do we need to have in place? What processes does this require? They like to cut labor in half, but they're also very laborious at the same time. They enjoy working and they like being of service, but they just want to cut the steps in half. They like hacking things, taking shortcuts. They will study information. I mean, as I said, they're ruled by Mercury, and so they'll study patterns until they have them mastered and figured out, and then they'll find a way to advance the system. Pure, undisturbed Virgo is so neat and tidy. Now, I know very many Virgos who are a complete, it's chaos. In their mind, it's chaos, but it's because of the other placements. Pure Virgo will color coordinate things. Everything will have a label. Everything has a place. Everything has a home, because that way things run efficiently. If there's stuff on the floor, they can't move as quickly as they want. Now, another side to Virgo is when they're overstimulated, what they will do is they'll turn to Pisces qualities. They will turn to escapist tendencies, and this can manifest in multiple different ways. The most obvious one that I've seen is Virgos can often drink quite heavily when they are overwhelmed. So if you see a Virgo really throwing them back, it's because they are taking on so much, they're doing so much, and they're probably not giving themselves the pat on the back that they deserve. In fact, that is the one thing that they do not do, is they accomplish things, and as soon as it's accomplished, they're like, yeah, I was supposed to do that. It wasn't that big of a deal. And so there is never that moment of wow, like they don't have a sense of accomplishment after they do something. They feel like they just have to keep going, and they have a to-do list, and they keep adding to it, and they just keep going nonstop. And so it's really helpful for them, and I'll go into this when I talk about specific signs. It's really helpful for them to have a partner who makes them pause and appreciate themselves. The risk that Virgo runs, where they can kind of get confused, is that they want to be of service, but they oftentimes put themselves in the position of being a servant to a job, to a partner, and it takes multiple experiences of them just running on E before they recognize that there is a way to be available to people and to be helpful and to make an impact, but not at the expense of their mental health and their physical well-being. They will do anything for the person that they love. But should they? Like that's the balance. Should they? When I think of Virgo, I think of that movie Holes, and that character who's like, I can fix that. They always show up, I can fix that, I can do that. Oh, gorgeous. So let's talk about some deal breakers as it relates to a Virgo. Virgo is an earth sign. Though it is changeable, mutable, flexible, understanding, empathetic, tolerant, it will not tolerate someone who is duplicitous and untrustworthy. They don't like someone who is unreliable. They won't tolerate, say, someone who has someone who is like a bee, going from flower to flower. They want commitment. They want loyalty. They want someone who is in it for the long haul. Because they are so dedicated and so loyal, they don't like mind games, and they do not tolerate emotional manipulation. If you're going to be playing those games, they're going to be very quickly disinterested, and they will tell you. They'll be like, you know what? No, you're immature and you have tons of work to do, and they'll list all of the reasons why they can't be with you, and then they'll just walk away. This is not an absolute truism for every Virgo in the world, but from my personal experience, I find that Virgos are always in a job that requires serving the community. And this can manifest as something as simple as like working as a mailman, or being a nurse, or being an esthetician. Like there's some skill that they develop that allows them to be of service to the community. But largely they're in healthcare, or they have a strong interest in health. Like how good is the quality of food that you're eating? How balanced is your diet? They're all over vitality, health. It goes back to like that, they're represented by the Virgin, like Mother Teresa, someone who shows up for others, who has like a heart that never gets tired. So I would be curious to see, if your Virgo is in that type. Sun in Gemini, Sun in Virgo. You guys have more in common than you would expect. And it also presents a little bit of challenge and friction in a way that could really go either way. So to begin with, you guys are both ruled by Mercury, which means that you are collecting information in different ways. Gemini is kind of collecting information and then thinking, oh, what do I think about this? Where does this fit, like in the scheme of life? And what's my personal opinion on that? Whereas Virgo is measuring things. It's taking stock of what is literally before it and then creating a system of efficiency. It likes things alphabetized, color coordinated. It likes knowing that we have control over the situation, that information isn't falling through the cracks and we are adjusting our behavior or the protocols as necessary. Virgo is very grounded. It's an earth sign, which means that it's practical, sensible. If it can't see it with the five senses, it really doesn't exist. Although I do find that Virgo characters tend to lean towards more spirituality, or they do have a little bone in them that believes in synchronicities and understands that there is something else that science class doesn't explain to them. But it is an introverted sign by default, so you could have a Virgo with tons of, say, Leo placements, and this makes someone flamboyant and fun and spontaneous and a vibe. But just speaking solely to the sun, this is somebody who rests and wakes up feeling charged. The moment they start moving, they're draining their battery. Where on the other hand, Gemini sleeps, the body rests, but it wakes up, it's like, oh shit, my pilot light went out. I have to go out into the world in order to get myself going. And so there is this ability, or not ability, there is this need to get out into the world and start doing things. Naturally, this would be an issue. But because Virgo also has this jittery energy, it wants to get up early too. It wants to be ahead of the game. And so there is kind of like camaraderie or partnership in that way. Gemini has a really busy mind. Virgo experiences that busyness within its body. And so it's jittery. It likes to go on hikes. It likes to exercise. It's a health nut because its body seems to be the depository for all of the stress that it picks up. The body tells Virgo where it's at, and they often take their health very seriously, and they will take your health seriously too if they're in a relationship with you. But I do think that, also, you guys are both mutable signs, which means that you guys are about endings, transitioning, turning away from something else and moving towards another thing. And so what I find with mutable relationships is that there is this impermanence where it's hard for you guys to really commit to the relationship because Virgo is like, let go and let God, what's meant to be will be. And Gemini is like, oh, what's that? Gemini is the only sign in the zodiac that does not have a home in terms of mythology. It's the messenger. And so it's kind of like a flight attendant in so many ways, where it's traveling to all these different places and spaces and collecting necessary information to communicate it to, the natural recipient. And it likes to be on the move. It doesn't mind feeling homeless. Peter Pan syndrome is something that we can find with Gemini characters. It's not so much a representation of like their immaturity or their lack of growth and development. More so, it is their soul's grip on that childlike wonder and curiosity about the world. And I find that childlike behavior really serves Gemini well if you're focusing solely on their development versus them in a relationship with you and what they can give you. Virgo likes having a home. It likes predictability. It likes knowing that someone is devoted to them, because that is definitely a word that I would use when Virgo is in love. It's devoted. It wants to take care of you. It wants to feed you yummy food. It wants to be of service. Its love language may very well be acts of service. And so when you're dating a Gemini, we see immediate conflict. I'm not even going to dance around it. Gemini is phony, fake, and fickle, duplicitous in nature. And to bring, words to the duplicity, there is a part of Gemini that is always the eternal child, and there is the wise adult who has collected life lessons, and they're really just vacillating between or bouncing between the two, and depending on who they want to lead with in that particular moment. And so Gemini is not focused on emotions. It doesn't want to stay still. It doesn't want to, wants to give the middle finger to predictability. There's nothing to be learned if you are constantly doing the same things over and over again. I'm not saying that Virgo does the same things over and over again, but it's definitely here in the real world, and it understands that we are committed, we have responsibilities, and we have to show up for shit and people. And it's here to care for others. It's a healer of sorts. And so, I can find that they are very attracted to each other because they kind of have what the other person doesn't, or they kind of express the same energy, but in a very different way. But as time goes on, Virgo may find that Gemini doesn't prioritize them. Gemini doesn't have, unless there's tons of Cancer. If you have a Gemini with Cancer, they will cry over their opinions. They will be overly or expressive, I would say, because you have the water, which is the feelings, and then the air that is a wordsmith. And then, so if you do have a Gemini with water placements, then you can feel it. The Virgo side of you, your body side, can feel like, oh, this person wants family, they want commitment. Yes, they will still need to travel and move around, but there is this soul desire, and they'll talk about it. They'll talk about kids, they'll talk about family. They will bring their family into the equation in a space where it would otherwise not be present. And so if it's just pure Gemini and pure Virgo, Virgo's going to feel like you don't show up for this relationship. You don't really value me. I really appreciate your intellect and what you bring to the table, but there is an overall lack of water in the relationship that can kind of make these two people, because they're not in complementary elements, you might enjoy being around each other. You might have a lot of fun together, especially the Virgo with the Gemini. The Gemini can kind of use language as a means to help Virgo assuage their anxiety. The Gemini can bring the positive, optimistic side to the information that's being received that Virgo will find quite nice. But I just don't see you guys sitting down and looking at each other in the eye and feeling a soul-to-soul connection. I don't doubt lack of passion. I don't doubt lust. I don't doubt curiosity. It's really the mystery factor that's here. Gemini will be drawn to Virgo initially because it's mysterious, it's new, and it will fixate on Virgo in a way that it fixates on everything. And Virgo will think, wow, it's so nice to be investigated like this. This person really cares about me. And I'm not saying that Gemini doesn't care, but I'm saying that kind of attention to detail is fleeting. Gemini is a quick learner. So once it learns you, it's like, oh, you really are just as you appear. And that can kind of make Virgo feel like, oh, you just switched up the game on me. And Virgo can get a little bit insecure. I think all earth signs are born, questioning their value and their worth because they're so here to establish and prove themselves to themselves. And so, we can create some insecurities like that. And then also little white lies. I think that Virgo is not known to be a liar, but it will withhold its feelings and its emotions if it can assess that you are not in a place to receive it, or if it's going to cause an issue. Again, Virgo with the Leo placement will just say it theatrically, right? But if it's just Virgo, then they will be like, you know what, I don't want to make my partner upset right now. I had a really long day. They'll be very considerate. And because they're a socially oriented sign, which means that they are paying attention to how their behaviors affect the people around them. And they're looking at it through the lens of wanting to make people better and to purify them. Gemini is a personally oriented sign, which means I'm giving it that permission slip to be selfish. It is learning how to think independently for itself. And it's going to take its whole lifetime to master this skill. And so, there is a mashup of a mismatch, a mashup. What did I just say? There is a mismatch between the perspectives and what you guys want from the world. The way that Virgo loves you, it's like Scorpio love. It's like, why did you have to say that? Why did you have to critically, provide constructive criticism? I don't need judgment right now. And Virgo's looking at it like, but that's a problem. I can solve your problems. You can solve your problems. And then we can live a healthier, more purified life. Then we can feel good, right? That's what Virgo is thinking. It's always one step like, oh, wait, this needs to be fixed. Oh, wait, this needs to be fixed. And Gemini might find their insights useful. They might find the truth in it, but they might also view Virgo as a Debbie Downer because they are also looking at the same things but have a positively charged opinion. Virgo tends to, hold on a little bit more with its observations, whereas Gemini is like, whew, next. And so I see you guys being really attracted to each other, very curious about each other initially, and then having those really real world conflicts. I'm not saying that it will break you guys apart, but I do think that you guys need to be aware of what the other person needs and honestly ask yourself if this is something that you can get on board with. Because we're talking about the sun, we're talking about sanity, we're talking about people healing their soul, or healing their human wounds of sorts. And so, if you're looking at a Gemini and you're like, this impermanence, this inconsistency, this mutability, this duplicitous, this childlike behavior, the inability to see other people and consider how your actions affect us, if you're the Virgo saying that, it's not going to work. Because in some degree, those are expressions of Gemini behavior and they exist to accomplish the Gemini motive. And if Gemini, you're looking at Virgo like, dude, you're a negative Nancy, bro. Nothing is ever perfect. Nothing is ever right. You know, you're anxious or whatever criticisms you may impress on Virgo. Know that all of those behaviors, again, same thing, exist to help them get closer to who they are meant to be. And so it's not a deal breaker, but I think that it requires more energy. And when things require more energy, we think it's not meant to be. And that doesn't always have to be the case. You can just be aware and you can make decisions to either stay with each other or not, or to work on these things or not. Now, this is only like what immediately comes to my mind when I think about this combination. If you would like to learn more either about your birth chart or your relationship chart, you can find me at wellandrising.com/services. If I didn't already say this, there are over 2,000 configurations. And so this is just one. It's an important one. But, you know, if you were looking at emotional temperament, sex drive, appeals, all of those things that come with relationships, you're going to want to book a reading. All right, toodles.